Hello, and welcome to this video where I'm going to talk through how I would approach this week's project. So this week you learned all about animation and using P5 to create variables that store your state, the state of your sketch, and then using those variables to draw a frame from your sketch and then changing those variables over time so that your sketch changes over time to show an animation. So hopefully you've already watched through that video or read through the tutorial, and now you are here to practice what you learned by creating a project. And this video is going to sort of talk about that and walk through how I would approach it. And I think I'm probably going to use this as an excuse to talk about my favorite algorithm in all of computer science. So we'll see how it goes. So this week, I went back and forth on this, honestly. And in a lot of the other previous weeks, I had like a number in my head where I was looking for like 10 function calls or 5 if statements or something like that. And I thought about doing that again. I thought maybe I would require you to have like 5 variables that you changed over time, or maybe like 2 things on screen that changed. And I could have done that, but in the end, I decided to leave it more open. And so rather than requiring a certain number of any particular thing, I am going to say that I am going to look for one thing, and that is your canvas changing over time. And that's really open to interpretation. Um, you can create an animation sort of the traditional way by changing variables over time, which is probably what I'm going to do in this video. Or you could go back to some stuff that we've talked about in a couple of the other previous weeks, like the random function, where maybe you fill the screen with random cats or random houses or whatever it is. Um, Either way, I'm going to count that as animation, and as long as I look at your canvas and something in it changes over time, I'm going to count it. So I encourage you to get creative with it. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is maybe just talk through like how I would approach it. So first of all, I've given you an example, and you can maybe start with this example and maybe open up the editor and straight up just paste it in. Let me make that a little bigger. So I'm just pasting the example code in, and it shows a circle that bounces up and down. This is pretty much exactly what I did in the video for the lesson this week. So you can start from that. Maybe you want to create like a DVD logo bounce around animation. I don't know if you will know what I'm talking about, or if that's too old at this point, but you could do something like that, or really anything. Change this to be I don't know, a frog jumping up and down the screen, or a ballerina doing a dance, or something like that. You could play around with that idea. The other place I would look is if you go to the examples section of happycoding.io and then go to p5.js. I've broken these down into kind of sections. And so, if you've seen this before, you probably already know what I'm talking about. If not, then welcome to it. And here's a bunch of animation examples where you can maybe look at a few of these. So I don't know, I'll go to like the random skulls one. Here's the sort of idea that I was talking about earlier, where maybe your animation is actually just filling the screen with a random something. In this case, it's skulls for spooky Halloween, but could be anything. Could be random cats or random words, or really anything. I don't want to restrict you too much. Or you could go the other way and do something like, oh, I don't know, let's go with this one, where you show something that changes over time. It's kind of dark. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it real well in the video. Let me maybe refresh a little bit, but this shows a line kind of bouncing around the screen, and it uses the exact same concepts that we talked about in the lessons for this week. The only difference is that there's 2 circles bouncing around instead of one, and I'm drawing a line in between them, and it kind of results in these kind of trippy animations and these trippy artifacts. So anyway, you could use some of these for inspiration, and that's another place that I would look. And I think what I'm going to do is probably a version of this, the random walker. I'm probably not even going to click into it right now because I've done this a bunch of different times and a bunch of different ways, and I want to maybe just kind of start from scratch. So anyway, I would go to those couple different places for inspiration and then think to myself, like, okay, what do I want to show on screen? And in this case, in my case, what I'm going to show is I'm going to make P5 scribble around kind of randomly for me. And this is actually like a real algorithm called the random walker algorithm. So random walker. I am the first result. I think it knows I'm me. Anyway, random walker algorithm is a real algorithm in computer science. You can get into the fancy math stuff of it, but really what it is you take your pen, you put your pen down, and then you move your hand randomly. And so you can think of it as scribbling kind of randomly. Only you're getting the computer to do it. And there's a lot of really cool kind of applications of it, and a lot of cool, I don't know, more philosophical ideas related to it. But really, I like it because it looks cool and it's relatively easy to explain. So it's my favorite algorithm. So that's what I'm going to kind of work through in the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. So how it would start is always, by now, I think you probably know, to open up the P5 editor, and I'll get that working, and cool, there we go. I will start by creating like a state. So I don't know, maybe I'll have like so I'm going to have my pencil at a random point and then scribble it around. So maybe I'll have like an X and a Y. Let X, let Y, and maybe that'll be my my state, these variables are my state. And I'll give them, maybe I'll just start them in the middle. X equals width over 2, Y equals height over 2. I could start it randomly. I could say maybe random width, and maybe I'll do that eventually. But for now, I think I'll just start it right in the middle, width over 2. Okay. Then what I want to do is in draw, I want to, maybe I'll do this first. I'll draw my scene. Right now I'll just start with circle, X, Y, maybe 25. And let's just start with that. I'm going to run my code, even though I haven't really written, much. I've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code, and that is plenty. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to test my code. I'm going to hit run, and cool. I've got my circle on the screen, and that is progress. That's something, and it works. No errors. Great. So let me give myself some white space and think about what I want to do next. So what I want to do is move the circle randomly, and there's a couple ways to do that. And if you go watch some of my other random walker videos, you'll see that I've done it a couple different ways throughout the years. But this time, I think what I want to do is create a new variable. Maybe I'll call it like let new x, maybe, or maybe let next x. Let's say new x, and I'm going to set it equal to my current x plus, and now here's where the randomness comes into play. I want to set my new x equal to whatever my x is plus a random number. Let's just start with like random number between 0 and 5. Let me see what that feels like. And then I'm going to say x equals new x. And I'm doing this kind of in 2 steps because, well, spoiler alert, it's going to come in handy in a second. But I don't know, it's just another way of structuring your code in a way that maybe is easier to read. Totally up to you. If you like splitting it up into 2, that's cool. If not, you can always do it the old way of just doing x equals blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to do it this way for now because I think it'll come in handy in a minute. So let me run that and see what happens. Actually, maybe before I run it, I'll say what I expect to happen is my X position will move randomly. My Y position won't move at all, so it'll stay like vertically in the same spot, but it'll move horizontally kind of randomly. So let me run that and see what happens. And okay, something happened, but I don't know if it's exactly what I expected. So let me run that again and kind of pay attention. So my X is just going off to the right. And if I think about why that is, or if I like stare at this line of code, what's happening is I'm creating a new X variable and I'm setting it equal to whatever X currently is. So it starts out at what, 200 plus a random number between 0 and 5. So that could be 3, that could be 4, that could be 0.75, could be 4.99999. But it's always going to add something. Well, it could be 0, I guess. So sometimes it will not move at all, but it's either going to not move or move a little bit to the right. It's always going to increase, which is what we see. So it's maybe hard to see in the video, but if you kind of squint at it, you can tell that it's not always moving at the same speed. It kind of jitters a little bit, and that's because they're moving like randomly, but it's always moving in the same direction. So I need to change something here, and there's a few ways to do this, but what I will do is instead of choosing a number that's between 0 and 5, I'm going to choose a number that's between -5 and 5. So now this line of code is saying create a new X variable, set it equal to whatever X is, and then add a random number between -5 and 5. So that could be -3, could be +3, could be -4.999, could be +4.999. And it could be 0. It could be anywhere in between those two numbers. But what this means is that roughly half the time, it's going to be negative, which means it's going to go the other direction. So let's run that and see what happens. And there you go. It is working. I don't know if it's art yet. I don't know if it's beautiful. I don't know if it sparks joy, but it is doing what I wanted it to. It is kind of moving randomly back and forth. So there's a couple things I could do next. One, I could get the Y part of it working, because right now I just have the X part of it working. Yeah, let's do that next, actually. So I have X and Y, and I'm using them here. So now I'm going to have a new Y variable, and I'm going to do basically the exact same thing. Y plus random between -5 and 5. And I'm going to say down here, new, Y equals new Y. Okay. So I'm doing the exact same thing, just with the Y variable as well. So let's run that and see what happens. And now, yeah, okay, you have this kind of, I don't know, this circle has had too much caffeine or something. It's kind of jittering all over the place, but it's getting closer to my end goal of having a pen that kind of scribbles around the screen randomly. What do I want to do next? So right now it's just a circle, and it's kind of up to you, but what I imagined was a line that's kind of drawing around the screen. So let's kind of deal with that next. So remember that the draw function is called 60 times a second. And here, in this case, the first thing I do every frame, every time draw is called, I call background, which is going to clear out the old frames. It's going to draw a new background, paint over what was already there, and just paint a new gray clean slate, as it were, which is why I see just like one frame at a time here. So if I move this to my setup function, I will draw my background once at the very beginning of the sketch and then never again. So let's see what this does. And okay, now I have my circle kind of scribbling around the screen. That's kind of a tongue twister, scribbling around the screen. And yeah, I mean, that looks kind of cool. That's kind of trippy. And to be honest with you, this achieves the goal of the homework. I could hand this in and I would get 100% because something moves on the screen. And I don't know, I actually kind of like it. It's kind of, it's got a, I don't know, the artifact that results is kind of cool looking. But I'm going to keep going because this isn't exactly what I wanted to do. So let me think about what I want to do next. So it's a circle, and that's cool. But what I actually want is a kind of a thinner line. And so I could maybe change the size of my circle, maybe make that like really small to like 5. And okay, that's, still pretty cute. I kind of like that. But let's see what happens if I make this kind of faster, if I expand these numbers to be -10 and 10, so it kind of moves at twice the distance, twice the speed as it did before. And now you kind of see that, like, sure, it's kind of a path of circles, but they're not super connected. You can't really, you can kind of trace a path, but it's not really looking like a scribble, which is what I want. So what I'm going to do now is, instead of drawing a circle, I'm going to draw a line. And where do I want that line to be? Well, this is one of the main reasons I did it the way I did it here. The reason I split this up into 2 steps is I now have what I need to draw a line. I don't just have X and Y. I actually have my X, my Y, and my new X and my new Y. So I can get rid of this line. Yeah, let's get rid of that line. And now here, after I create my variables, I can call the line function and draw a line from xy to new x, new y. And let me run that, see what happens. And there you go. That is more scribble-like. And it's working because I have kind of split my my math up into 2 steps. I calculate the next position kind of separately, kind of as a separate step, so that I have access to both at one time. Again, a few different ways to do that, but I'm going to kind of gloss over that because, I don't know, I kind of like this way. So I do have my line, and that is indeed working, but if I let this kind of just sit for a while, it will eventually go off the screen. And sometimes it'll come back, but generally, eventually, it'll go away forever and never come back. And again, it's kind of it's an aesthetic choice. It's up to you whether, maybe you like that. Maybe you like that it goes off the screen and never comes back, and there's your art, there's your finished product. But for me, I want to kind of keep it always on the screen. So how would I do that? And also, let me maybe change this to like a much larger number just to prove to you that I'm not lying to you, that it will eventually go off the screen and never come back. Sure, yeah, maybe. It might come back, but it might not. And again, it's down to the power of random. So what I want to do is not let my line go off the edge. And again, just like you're probably starting to realize in code, there's a few different ways we can do it. There's always a few different ways, and honestly, it's kind of down to personal preference. There's not really a one correct way to do it. So let me just talk through a couple different ways before I kind of choose my ultimate goal. Here, these 2 lines of code, what they are doing is creating the next positions, the new x and the new y. And so at this point, I have a new x and a new y variable set to whatever the next position is. Now the problem is that these can go off the screen. They can be less than 0, they can be greater than width or greater than height, and I don't do anything. So what I could do is use an if statement here. I could say something like, if new x is less than 0, then new x equals 0, which is going to kind of constrain the value. So if new x starts to be less than 0, if I've added enough negative numbers to it so that now it's actually -10, I say, no, it's not. It's actually 0. So the lowest it can ever go is 0. So this is down to the power of random, so let's just see what happens. I kind of want it to go to the left, but it will likely not listen to me. Go off the left. Go. All right, let's try again. And yeah, you kind of see it there. Um, kind of. All right, maybe I'll keep going. Maybe I'll say take my word for it that this if statement here will constrain it, but since the random function is not cooperating, go. There, you can kind of see it there, where it tried to go off the screen here. Can I zoom in anymore? Kind of. It tried to go off the screen here. It tried to go become less than 0, and I said, nope, you're staying at 0. And so it moved again, and maybe it tried to go negative again, but I didn't let it. So then it had to eventually come back. And here's maybe an even better example up here, where it kind of just stays at that boundary line. But so that's only for the left edge. So I'd need to do something similar for the other edges. So I can say else if new x is greater than width. So if it's going off the right edge of the screen, then new x equals width. The exact same idea, just for the right side instead of the left side. So now, hopefully that's a little bit more obvious. Of course, I have not done the top or the bottom yet, so that's the direction it's going to go, of course. There you saw it kind of sticking on the left edge, and so that's kind of working. And let's see, will it go to the right? Nope. There-ish. You can see that it kind of tried to go off the right edge of the screen, but I'm not letting it anymore, because I'm saying if the new x value is greater than width, then no, it's not. It's exactly the width, so it stays on that line. So I could do the exact same thing. I could write another if statement for my y, my new y variable, and that would work using the same kind of pattern. But I'll show you another way to do this, and you can kind of pick and choose whichever way makes the most sense to you. So this if statement is one way to do it. However, similar to how we talked about how there's other shortcuts in code for code that is like really common, this pattern of keeping the number in between two other numbers is so common in P5 that P5 gave you a function that does it for you, actually. So let me go to the reference. And I'm going to look up a function called constrain. And constrain does pretty much exactly what I just did, only without requiring me to write any if statements or anything. So let me just demonstrate what that looks like. So I'm going to keep my new x logic the same, but let me do the new y logic this way. So I'm going to say new y equals, and I'm going to constrain it. And now I need to give the constrain function what? 3 parameters, 3 arguments. One is the number that I have, and then the second number is the lowest limit that it can be, and the third number is the highest number it can be. So this is exactly the same logic as this, but in a function call instead. So the number I have is new y, and the numbers I want to constrain it between are 0 for the very top of the canvas and height. So this single line of code is doing everything that this if statement was doing. It's the same logic, but for the new y variable instead. And again, there's not really a right or wrong here. I would say go with whichever approach makes the most sense to you. If seeing it in an if statement kind of explicitly coded out is easier for your brain to follow, then go with that. If minimizing the number of lines of code is easier for your brain to follow, then go with that as well. Totally up to you. All right, let me run this and see what it does. So you see that the scribble is kind of going off the bottom edge of the canvas, but it's being constrained. So it's trying to leave the canvas, and my code is no longer letting it. And that's true of all of the edges. It just tried to go off the left edge. I'm hoping that it kind of tries all of them, but it's down to the power of random, which normally I kind of love, but when I'm wanting to test like a specific thing, it's actually kind of frustrating. Okay, so there's the right edge, and yeah, there's the top edge. Okay, it's trying to go off of each edge, but I'm not letting it using either this logic or that logic. Okay, so again, the whole point of this video is to just sort of demonstrate how I would approach this project of making an animation. And to be honest, I use this as an excuse to show off my favorite algorithm. So I want to maybe put like a stopping point here and say, like, if you've watched this far, then I think you got the point of it. I don't want to force you to watch it any longer if you got the gist of it, but I'm at a point in this code where now I can do some like really fun things that I genuinely enjoy to do. So again, if you've had enough, cool. I celebrate that for you, and I don't want you to feel like you have to watch this whole video. But I'm going to spend maybe 10 more minutes playing around with the next part of this, which is random colors. Random colors are kind of my favorite thing to do, just because I don't know, they're unpredictable, but the result of how they come out is really cool. So anyway, like you can see this, like just the black on gray is kind of cool already. It's kind of this trippy, like I don't know. I think it's one of those like Rorschach tests where whatever you see is kind of a reflection of who you are. But I don't know. I see maybe like a map of a city or something, or you tell me what you see, I guess. So the black is interesting, but let me kind of spice it up a little bit. Let me change the color over time. So right now, what I'm doing is I have a random walker, which is navigating in two-dimensional space. It has X and Y. And what I want to do is about to sound really fancy, but it's not as fancy as it's going to sound. I want to navigate in five-dimensional space. I love saying it that way just because it sounds so absurd. But three of those dimensions are going to be R, G, and B. So it's going to be the color instead of the X and the Y. So let me maybe start with, I don't know, I'll start with R. I know eventually I want R, G, and B, but let me just talk about how I get there. I'm going to create a variable called R, and I'm going to set it equal to some number. Maybe I'll actually start it at random, between 0 and 255. And now I have an R that's random and 255. And here, before I draw my line, I'm going to change my stroke to that R. The R doesn't really matter yet, but let's just do it and see what happens. So now every time I run my code, I will get a sort of randomly colored line. They're both in kind of dark, kind of dark, kind of dark. Okay, there's a kind of lighter one because of the power of random, I have a different colored line here. And, a couple things I could maybe talk about. First, let me maybe just do G and B. Let G, let B. So I've got R, G, and B, and I'm going to say R, G equals also random of 255. Oops, 255. And B equals random of 255. Okay. And now I'm going to say stroke of R, G, and B, all of them. So now I have a full color instead of just a grayscale, black or white. And so now it's kind of that, I don't know, orangish greenish color. If I run it again, now it's this bright red color. If I run it again, now it's this blue purple color. And okay, that's cool. I feel like that's an improvement because every time I run this, it's going to be a different color, and that makes it kind of more interesting. But I want to take this a step further, and I want to change the color over time exactly how I am changing the position over time. So a few ways I can do that. I think I'll do it right here-ish. So I've got my positions. So all of this is like figuring out the next position. So after I do that, I will figure out my new color. So with my X and Y, I kind of did this goofy thing where I did it in two different steps. I created a new X variable, and I did that honestly because I knew I wanted to draw a line eventually. If I didn't do it in two steps, I would have eventually had to break it up into two steps. But for the colors, I don't think I need the before and the after. So I think I'm going to do it in one step, which might be handy if, you know, you're doing something that doesn't require remembering the previous value. So I'm going to say R plus equals, which is one of those shortcuts that I talked about, a random number between, I don't know, -5 and 5. And I might just keep it there. I might just stop there and see what happens. So okay, yeah, you can kind of see that the color is changing over time. I'm only changing the red component of the color, so it's not super obvious yet, and I'm only changing it like 5 at a time. But it started out that kind of greenish color, and now it's like orangish. So that's progress. I could maybe change these numbers to make them a little bigger, but I think I'll keep trucking and do G plus equals random of -5 and 5, and B plus equals random of -5 and 5. Okay, so now I'm moving my R, G, and B randomly every frame. So let's kind of look at that and see what happens. So it starts out as this green color, now it's kind of yellow, now kind of I don't know, yellow brownish, now it's pink, now it's red. So you get this artifact of the line changing color over time in addition to moving over time. And I'm kind of waiting to see if something dramatic happens, because there's something that I haven't done yet that I don't know. I actually don't know off the top of my head what happens if you don't constrain these. So right now the R, G, and B components are moving randomly, and that means that they are allowed to go less than 0 or greater than 255. I haven't constrained them at all. And I don't know, maybe P5 is smart enough to not care too much if you have an invalid value, but I don't know, let me increase these quite a bit and see if anything bad happens. So I think maybe not, actually. I think maybe it'll just kind of, if you have a negative number, maybe it like internally caps it at 0. But what that means is that I think I can kind of get locked into one color. So if I don't know, if one of my components goes negative too far, it'll just be 0 for a long time, and I think that'll be kind of boring. Or alternatively, if it goes too high and it's like now it's a million based on the power of random, it'll never come back to 255. So I want to constrain it, but honestly, I mean, I think I can probably get away with not doing that, but whatever. I'll just kind of demonstrate what that would look like. So I think I could actually do it in one line of code, but I tend to split these up just to make it easier to read, because this is how my brain thinks about it. I think I'm going to change these colors and then I'm going to constrain them. That's how I kind of think about it. So I'm going to say R equals constrain of R 0, 255. And I'm going to do that same thing for R, G, and B. G and B, and let's make sure that I don't forget anything while I copy paste R, G, and B. And yeah, okay, I think maybe this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Like, it's kind of stuck in this like red corner, this red universe. You can imagine that I think the R component of my color has just gone all the way up to 255, and it's like very high right now, and it'll never come back down. So my color will kind of stay in the red family. And again, personal choice, aesthetic choice, but I kind of want to have it be more constrained than that. So yeah, here we go. Now my line kind of travels around randomly, and it kind of changes color randomly as well. I also, while I'm here, I like to change the background color just because this gray is kind of, it's kind of boring. So if I started out darker, I usually kind of like that effect, but you can make it lighter as well, or stick with gray if that's your choice. But this is my favorite algorithm, the random walker algorithm, because it's relatively easy to explain. You take a pen and you put it down on a piece of paper and you scribble around randomly. The code is, I don't want to call it straightforward, but it uses all of the concepts that we've talked about so far. I didn't have to throw anything new at you to do this stuff. Knowing how to do it is itself a new thing, but you've seen most of these lines of code already. And it gets at some really cool things. If you want to nerd out about the random walker algorithm, that's a rabbit hole that you can go down. Just do a search for random walker, and then there's a bunch of information on it. And it gets at some of the like really interesting sort of intersections of art and computer science that I really like. The idea of emergence of more complicated patterns based on like these simple rules is literally my favorite thing. So I don't know. I really like this algorithm, so I wanted to use this project as an excuse to to throw it at you. I don't expect your project to be as involved as all this, but hopefully me walking through it and showing you a few different techniques was helpful. Um, so yeah, I could sit here for 10 more minutes and just kind of stare at it, but I think I will call it there and say thanks for watching, and I, as always, cannot wait to see what you come up with. So see you in class.